In the meantime, I suppose their remedy, if they don't wish to wait for us, is to follow the route of the Green Party and go to federal court.
Yeah, they could do that. Sure.
I'm surprised they hadn't already.
Well, we haven't turned them down.
Yes, we have. And I take issue with that. There was a motion made, I think maybe one by myself and one by Mr. Eggers, and seconded and voted down by the majority of this board to recognize those parties.
Yeah, Mr. Lewis, I understand that, but you may recall that each of the members who voted against that said for now.
Well, I read the letters that came in from the Democrat Party objecting to it, if that's what you're referring to.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
Thank you. I think you probably do. But.
Well, you and I'm happy to talk about that, offline here, but I don't understand what you're referring to, but that's all right.
What's up, North Carolina, and welcome back to another, I'm going to go so far as to say perfect episode of Liberty Inc., your source for all things liberty in our great Tar Heel state. Today, my guest, Eric Brakey, has taken over running the Free State Project in New Hampshire. One of the more successful politicians, registered Republican. I would put Eric's record up against the most stalwart libertarian, and I think it holds up. Really interesting conversation about how he got where he is, running for politics, being young, his goals with the Free State Project, and what comes next. And then, of course, Dub and Groo Talk Sports. Remember to hit like and subscribe. Any questions, comments, complaints, hate, dinner invitations, anything along those lines, communications at lpnc.org. In the meantime, enjoy. Hey, what's up, North Carolina? Thank you for tuning in for our guest for the 8th episode, 4th season of Liberty Inc., your source for all things liberty in the great Tar Heel state. Today, I feel like we've just been getting some awesome guests this season, and I'm excited to keep that tradition going. We have Eric Brakey with us. Eric is now head of the Free State Project, correct? Chair?
Executive director, but yeah, essentially, that's right.
He comes from Ohio, but Eric has a long history of political success in Maine, both as a Maine senator and as a Maine House member, running as a Republican, but with a distinctly libertarian track record and bent and avowed philosophical viewpoint. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing all right. As we mentioned before we got started, I'm a little exhausted and recovering from over a week at Pork Fest, plus setting up and tearing down and having an awesome Porcupine Freedom Festival in New Hampshire this year. So ready for what comes next, but glad to be on with you tonight.
Well, so I alluded to it up front, but for those who don't know, you want to kind of give your background, because you have a pretty impressive story. Youngest person elected in Maine's history to the state house, correct?
Well, not the youngest ever elected, but when I was elected for the first time at the age of 26, I was the youngest state senator in the country at that moment. But yeah, I got started on the Ron Paul campaign in 2012. I was just a young guy trying to make a difference, and any who remember 2012 in Maine, there was a big Maine was kind of a flashpoint for the liberty movement that year, but I won't go into all the stories or we'll be talking forever. But yeah, then 2 years later, ran for state senate, ousted an incumbent, served several terms, 2 terms there. I'm known during that time for passing constitutional carry and expanding medical cannabis and another of other kind of liberty policy changes. I left to run for the U.S. Senate in 2018, and also I ran again for the U.S. Congress in 2020. Neither of those efforts took, so I went to work for Young Americans for Liberty for a while, was their national spokesman before I came back home to Maine and took my state Senate seat back. But after a term there, I have decided it's time to pass the torch on to other people and look at new opportunities. So There was a job opening with the Free State Project across the border in New Hampshire. I'm very impressed with the work that they have been doing over my decade in politics, and so it seems like a natural fit. I am. Uh, and I'm going to be moving to New Hampshire before the end of the year, and I'm currently leading the Free State Project, which I imagine probably the next question you would ask is what the hell is the Free State Project? And for those who don't know, it's a mass migration movement of libertarians across the country to the state of New Hampshire. It's basically premised on the idea that as libertarians, there are millions of us across the country, but we're still a minority wherever we might be. We're kind of a diaspora, this remnant of people who understand the founding principles that America was supposed to be built on. But that's not really the direction that our culture and our government have gone in over the last several centuries. But if we kind of gather and concentrate libertarians in one place, a place with already a strong libertarian streak like New Hampshire, the live free or die state, we can start to have a profound impact on the politics and the culture. And that's what we're doing with the Free State Project. Thousands of people have moved. We're having a huge impact on the politics. About a quarter of the members of the legislature are libertarians who are, for the most part, registered as Republicans. But also the cultural impacts is great with the communities that are being built. So anyway, that's a very long answer with many steps. I guess I just covered like 14 years of history in maybe 120 seconds. So forgive me for that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So you are definitely a libertarian. I have no questions on that. But I look at like your success, I look at what Justin Amash is doing, where there's a good chance he wins the nomination and the seat back, almost certainly would not have won under the exact same platform running as a libertarian. You've had all this success as a Republican. You mentioned there's millions of libertarians. There's probably more than they realize. And I certainly think one of the biggest hurdles we face is people who will sort of look the other way on their principles because they're more afraid of what they see as the other side winning. So from the work that you've done, people you've met and the successes you've had, both running as a Republican and now working on the Free State Project, sort of what do you see as the advantages and disadvantages to the strategy as running as libertarians under another party?
Well, I mean, this is the challenge of the way that our elections are set up, and also just the ingrained features of human nature, right? So as humans, when we're thinking politically, we tend to be driven by both our hopes and our fears. And our fears of what our opponents might do should they have power, and our hopes for, what a better future could be if the right person were elected, right? But the challenge is in a system where it's a plurality win system, right? We don't have parliamentary systems where, you get a proportion of the legislature based on the proportion of the vote that you get. No, it's a winner take all system based on who gets the plurality. And a system like this will necessarily gravitate towards two parties because while people want to hope for the best person who most aligns with their vision, they're also driven very much by fear of the greater evil. And so you tend to have a system that gravitates towards just two viable choices in any given race. And because of the infrastructure that's been built over time for both of the two major parties, it always, for the most part, ends up being those two major parties. And people have, and a lot of people's voting habits are habitual. You've got about a third of the population that are going to vote Republican no matter what, a third that are going to vote Democrat no matter what. And so if you run as a major party candidate, you automatically have a third of the vote right there. And then you just got to work to capture the undecideds, the independents, the unenrolleds, whatever you call them. But if you're running as a third party, as a Libertarian Party candidate, you're basically starting with maybe 1% of the vote as your base. And then you need to capture basically every other vote that's unaccounted for to have any chance of competing. It's not, I don't see it as very much a viable strategy for winning elections, though I do see a lot of value in the Libertarian Party in a lot of other respects. I think that there's value in being able to, act as a spoiler against neoconservatives or trying to, I think as Dave Smith talks about it, trying to extort the major parties for concessions to not spoil their races. I mean, those are ways that the Libertarian Party can wield influence under the system that we have today. But we're a very long way from the Libertarian Party being a viable party for getting people elected. So I think that the liberty movement that has kind of made its way in the Republican Party since the days of Ron Paul has had a lot of success getting people elected, particularly to state legislatures around the country. People look oftentimes at Washington, D.C. and say, oh, you've only got Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and maybe a few B-plus people here and there. So they think maybe that strategy hasn't worked. And it's true that D.C.'s kind of really broken, and we haven't had too many liberty people elected there. But if you look at the state legislatures around the country, there's a quiet revolution going on in the Republican Party, and it's happening in the state capitals.
And even in some places in the Democrat Party. And I want to continue on that thought, but I got a tangential question for you. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Hypothetically, what would it take for people to abandon the Republicans and Democrats? Because let me frame that. We pushed things pretty far. Like, the polarization is bad. The uniparty is just doing uniparty things all the time. The will of the people is almost ignored, to the point where that blindly loyal support for each of the quote unquote big parties is beyond any irrationality. It's like, I'm going to root for my team no matter what.
I think it would take a truly dynamic candidate. I don't know. It's like Elon Musk got the Constitution changed so that he could run for president, and and did so as an independent. Like, he's an example of someone who would be a truly exceptional candidate who might kind of break the kind of Republican Democrat hold. Of course, he's doing better things than running for president, so that's not going to happen. But honestly, I think it's very difficult to see a way that either of the two major parties are permanently dislodged, because the thing is, within the parties, there are kind of revolutions that happen within those parties themselves, right? So it's like the Republican Party is still one of the two major parties, but the Republican Party of today is not the same Republican Party that existed in the George W. Bush years. There's been a revolution within the party, the America First kind of MAGA revolution that's dislodged the neocons. So I think, people are going to habitually kind of keep falling in with the two major parties unless we have dramatic rewrites to our election rules. But I've always seen that the real kind of field of play then is within the primaries of those major parties, right? I mean, look at what's happened in the Democratic Party. You've got like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and the socialists. Like, I think they were smart enough to say, we're not going to try to get radical revolutionary change by going through the Peace and Justice Party or the Green Party. No, they've taken their forces into the Democratic Party, and they've been winning primaries and ousting kind of their ideological opponents within that party. And the same thing has been going on within the GOP. I think that Liberty Republicans and MAGA Republicans have been displacing the old guard neoconservatives. And probably at one day, whatever kind of uneasy coalitions might be formed between the MAGA folks and the Liberty Republicans, I certainly imagine one day when the neocons are vanquished, there's going to be a new kind of conflict there. But for right now, I perceive there's something significant that's really gone on in the Republican Party the last 8 years. I think the party is in a better place than it was when the neocons were in charge. But that's certainly, it's not a libertarian party, but I think that there are some ways it's become more libertarian in terms of foreign policy. And I also think that there's you've got hundreds and hundreds of kind of liberty champions who are being elected to state capitals. And I think that's the revolution that's not televised because it's not happening in Washington, D.C.
So what do you see? Some insider baseball here. One of the things we say in North Carolina is Republicans love to run as libertarians and govern as Democrats. I feel confident talking to you because I've seen your voting record and your proposed legislation record. You run as a libertarian, you govern as a libertarian. You don't care what team uniform you're wearing. I do go back and forth in sort of the merits of that strategy. What are we giving up? What are we gaining? It's like Thomas Sowell said, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Okay, fine. I have full respect for what you're doing. But within the Republican Party, what you see, and here's my concern with that strategy. The reason that uniparty candidates keep getting elected is because they are financed in a way that makes it incredibly advantageous to their getting elected. And they're financed by special interest groups, whether it's corporate lobbyists or some other special interest group, who is representing that interest in a way where it is financially important to them to get certain legislation passed. We're going to spend probably $16 billion on this election. People don't spend $16 billion unless it's worth $16 billion. So how do you avoid the trap of abandoning libertarian principles within the party against the money that tends to control both parties?
Well, I would say a few things. I mean, first of all, I think you're absolutely right that when we're talking about federal races, we're at a severe disadvantage. I mean, our opponents in federal races literally have access to a money printing machine, and they print trillions of dollars out of thin air. Then they appropriate it out to their campaign donors, who then, it's a giant money laundering scheme, right? Oh, we're giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, which really means we're giving it to the military-industrial complex, which is going to launder the money and then donate it back to the politicians who voted to appropriate the money to them in the first place. So everyone gets rich along the way, and the people who are voting to do this are getting huge contributions. Right. So I certainly think that personally, I look at it as Washington, D.C. as a lost cause. I don't think that we're ever going to win there. I think it's a fortified citadel of corruption. And, we can get a few people to kind of pierce through the, past the barrier. We can get a few people like they couldn't stop Thomas Massey. They couldn't stop Rand Paul. And there's a few people been elected there. But ultimately, I mean, those people are never going to have more power than just their ability to use the bully pulpit, because they're going to be so outvoted by people who are directly controlled by these special interests. But the beauty of our constitutional framework is that the 10th Amendment is there, and the structure of how our government still works, whether DC wants to acknowledge it or not, is that the federal apparatus is very vulnerable to nullification. They cannot execute so many of their unconstitutional federal laws without the cooperation of the states. And while it may be difficult to win federal elections, it is much easier and accessible for us to win state legislative elections around the country. And that's where we have the competitive advantage, because we have grassroots, right? You can only throw so much money at these local elections to try to mitigate the fact that people are going door to door and talking directly to voters. And there's just a lot of things you need actual shoe leather for, that, you can throw a bunch of money into local elections, but the candidate who goes out and knocks 8,000 doors and meets face to face with the voters can be greatly outnumbered, but have those personal connections.
And not to interrupt, but because this point is so important that you're making, sometimes it's not 8,000, sometimes it's 800, and it is not worthwhile to spend money when it's that small to the big parties. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. Well, no, you're right. It really varies. I mean, I think maybe the most I ever knocked in a race was 8,000. So maybe that was me being a little braggadocious. But yeah, I mean, that was a state Senate race. State House races can be smaller. I mean, it all depends on the state and the population of your state and how your legislature is divided up. But I guess just to boil it down like this. The establishment has extreme advantages when it comes to federal races, but grassroots people have extreme advantages when it comes to local races. If we're smart and disciplined, we know how to campaign effectively. We know how to tailor our message to our voters, and we do the work. So that's why you look at like the Young Americans for Liberty has a coalition. They've got over 400 legislators in their coalition now across the country. When you go back a decade, maybe it was a couple dozen. So this is kind of what's really been developing under the surface over the last couple of years.
So let me ask you this, and I'm going to push back on some of this running as a Republican strategy, and I'm not taking the side against it. Well, if I was looking for a debate, I'd frame it as a debate, but I'm really curious. So like I'm picking it apart out of curiosity.
Please do.
How concerned are you with the bent towards party over principle that seems to be pervasive in Democrats and Republican politicians, whereas we're principle over party? So for example, I feel like I like Angela. I think Angela's done a pretty good job on some things.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to see that there's a good chance Ross is going to get freed. Assange was finally let go today. I didn't love the outcome because I feel like it sets precedent for what he did, but it's a hell of a lot better than what had been going on. Trump has publicly committed to putting a libertarian on his cabinet if he's elected. Kennedy's come out and said he'll free Assange and Snowden. I mean, we are very much in the conversation, and that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But if we compromise on that, then are we also acquiescing to going along with Trump invading Mexico or giving the death penalty to all drug dealers? Because those are things that are antithetical to our views. We have a lot of views where there's some variation. You can be a libertarian and be for very much controlling who's coming through the borders or for completely open borders. I don't think you can be a closed border libertarian, but I would argue that's the range.
Mm-hmm.
How do you rectify the positions of the Republican Party that really are antithetical? And when I say that, this is 35,000-foot view, because you've navigated the waters, Massey's navigated the waters, Amash has navigated the waters. They stayed true to their principles.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say there's always a danger of someone like going native, right? I mean, that's always a danger, right? Maybe someone was not as firm in their principles and their convictions as we thought they were. And I've seen good liberty legislators go bad and get so focused on being good team players, and they just become a part of the party apparatus. And that's a great shame. I feel like that's like when you lose a good Jedi to the dark side, right? Sometimes those are the folks you need to put out of their misery politically. But I think that there's a representative out of West Virginia. I'm forgetting his name, but he was one of the great legislators involved with the Defend the Guard effort. He wrote a great book called Stoicism at the State House, which kind of really focuses on how you apply Stoic principles to just basically not give a shit, right, about what other people think about you, and not like fall into the trap of trying to be a team player. Just go in there, know what you have to do, know what you're fighting for, and know that, at the end of the day, if you're doing the right thing, you're going to lose a lot, and that's okay. You're going to be the 1 to 34, vote many times, and that's okay. I often think about, I think kind of one of the great models for the kind of legislator I think that liberty folks should try to be, if they try to work through, I guess, any apparatus and they manage to get elected, as you look back to like Rome and Cato the Younger. And I will say this. So are you familiar with Cato the Younger? Are you familiar with him in Roman history?
Somewhat. My kids love Roman and Greek history. I've read through it. It's been a long time, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he was like the Ron Paul of his time.
Yeah.
He was like the last senator standing for the Republic as it fell to Julius Caesar and the empire. And, he was known as so principled, so dedicated to the principles of the Republic in a time of great corruption, when all the other politicians were engaging in graft. They would just their excuse was they would sigh and say, we can't all be Catos, right? Like he was the pure kind of, he was the Ron Paul. Like he was the one who would vote no out of principle when everyone else was going along with it. But I will say, historians regard one of the great mistakes that he made is that there was this populist figure named Pompey the Great, who was, maybe I'm overstretching a little bit, but, I think someone who calls himself the Great and is a populist who's kind of very
concerned. One of the triumvirate with Julius Caesar after
this.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
He was, right? But here's the thing. Before he was part of the triumvirate, he came to Cato the Younger and offered an alliance. He wanted an alliance with Cato through marriage of their kids. And Cato rebuffed him and said, no, I'm too principled. I will have nothing to do with you. I'm scared of your populism. I'm scared of your demagoguery and what you might become. Well, because Cato said no to Pompey the Great went off and formed an alliance instead with Julius Caesar, and the rest was history, right? And I share this story because I think sometimes about where we are right now with Donald Trump. And I kind of maybe this is me projecting a little bit onto history, something that isn't there, but I think there can be some parallels drawn between Donald Trump and Pompey the Great. He is not a libertarian. He is a populist. He is someone that we should regard with skepticism, but ultimately, like, he's fighting a lot of our enemies, and I think that we should look at does a temporary kind of coalition between libertarians and the MAGA movement, does that serve the purposes of the liberty movement? And can we do such a thing without going native and without losing our identity and becoming just absorbed into something else? And I think that's got to be for every single libertarian to decide for themselves. I'm not going to tell other people what they should do, but I do think that what the Libertarian Party has negotiated with the Trump campaign is very interesting, particularly when Trump knows that he's been stabbed in the back by the neoconservatives. He's offering to put libertarians in his cabinet. He's offering to put libertarians in charge of many criminal justice reform policy areas. And of course,
Sounds
freeing
like we
Ross
might get
Ulbricht would be
Department of
great too.
Education, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows what it could be? I mean, frankly, he hasn't spelled it out. I mean, for all we know, it could be he puts a libertarian in charge of transportation, and that would be a great irony, right? You finally get to the White House, and you're only in charge of the roads. So I kind of would like to know a little bit more detail, but if it means the possibility that neocons are far away from foreign policy and there are libertarians who are influencing Donald Trump. But I think some people scoff at that and say, oh, well, you're not going to influence Donald Trump. I think that's bullshit. I think that if anything, Donald Trump's great strength, the great positive about Donald Trump is also his great negative, which is how influenceable he's proven to be.
Yeah.
And when he's surrounded by Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo, he's like, okay, I guess we got to assassinate Julian Assange. But then when he's walking up into a war with Iran and he's listening to Tucker Carlson and Rand Paul, he walks away from it. So, I do think that the more we have people in his orbit, I do think that actually makes a difference.
So I'm with you 100%. And to Steelman, what they're doing, one of the things that I love about it is, unless something changes significantly, Trump's going to be our next president. I mean, that's to see him, and you can never be sure, and who knows, but he won when he was down in all the polls by a significant margin. In fact, one of the reasons I respect Nate Silver now is 538 was the only one out there in 2016 saying, wait a second, like, you all don't get how these polls work. They're polling the wrong people. Now Trump is up in all of those polls, and it's still not taking into account all the Trump people that don't trust polls, that go to rallies, that aren't doing these things. I think he's going to win by a fairly significant margin. So if you know who's going to win, why not take advantage of like put your flag on the winning horse? It doesn't mean you have to abandon your horse also. But I think there's a lot of merit. Like, this is game theory 101.
Yeah, but I do think it also kind of depends on what you're getting out of it, right? Like, truth be told, in 2012 when Mitt Romney became the Republican nominee, I didn't have a totally closed mind about voting for him if he had shown that he was going to bring libertarians into his administration and showed that we were gonna have some influence there. Instead, at the Republican National Convention that year, he kicked us in the teeth and said, "You aren't welcome in this party." So fuck him, right? And went and wrote in Ron Paul, and he lost the general election by margins that were smaller than what Ron Paul got in the primaries in key states. So, and hopefully that sent a message that to Republicans that you need to care about the libertarians because you lose elections without them. And where Trump has alienated much of the neoconservatives, he does need one of the other major factions in right-wing politics, which is the libertarians. And if by coalitioning with him, we can edge out the neoconservatives, I think that's something very interesting.
What influence do you see the neocons still having? And for those listening, when I think of neocons, very specifically, the definition includes the Warhawks. That's the most important part to me.
Yeah, I mean, the neoconservatives, I see the neoconservatives. The neoconservatives are masters at infiltration of movements and
Like the
organizations. Right? Yeah, and that's what the neoconservatives did with the Republican Party. It's what they've done with so many institutions on the right. And they are not. And you know, I think it's interesting too to see how like neoconservatives, you have like you know, sometimes I think they strategically back different horses so that no matter what, there's neocons in decision making roles. So right, so you've got Lindsey Graham who's still trying to be pro Donald Trump, even as he's a massive neocon, versus Liz Cheney, who's basically gone over to the Democrats and along with Bill Kristol and people like him, right? So they try to operate within all of these different movements to make sure that whoever wins, there's warmongers who are in charge, pushing us, in the direction of kind of the overall foreign policy plan. And I do think that, this is why I don't really want to tell libertarians what they should do. I think that libertarians need to decide for themselves, what horses to back or how to pursue the cause of liberty the best that they can. I mean, it could be, I don't know, maybe this is a scenario in which Bobby Kennedy wins and becomes president, in which case I'll be really glad that some libertarians like said they were backing Bobby and got close to him and helped him out. I mean, I think it's good for us to kind of try to influence all of these areas where we can.
I would be very happy if Kennedy became president. We love to talk about like, why are you supporting the lesser of two evils? I see Kennedy as not an evil. I see him as very misplaced on several policy positions, but I think he's a principled person. I think you can work with principled people. Trump is interesting because, as you point out, Trump's guiding factor is sort of, how do I think my next action is going to be received? Like, his ego is, like you said, his main driving force and his downfall. And no matter what people say, he's a smart guy. He's a marketing genius. He understands marketing better than anyone.
Yeah, you don't just like accidentally become president your first time running for political office
Yeah.
in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk Free State Project. So the whole idea is, let's pick a place that's already liberty minded, where there's fertile ground for more liberty, and let's infiltrate. Let's run as Republicans. Let's run as Democrats. Let's take over through the apparatus that's already set up, and let's spread liberty. And where I think this is genius is that, like you mentioned, there are a large number of people who simply go out, they show up to a polling station, they get handed a red or a blue card, and it says vote this way, and that's what they're doing. And I mean, I'm being symbolic. They're not always getting the cards, but they're always going to vote straight ticket. So if you're running as a ticket, they don't even need to know what you are. The important races become the primary races. How much success? So we see the success in New Hampshire, certainly. How much have you seen that success accelerate lately, and what are your goals as executive director?
Well, I think it has really accelerated in recent years. And I think, you go back even, I don't know what the numbers were like half a decade ago, but I guarantee it wasn't libertarians with a quarter of the legislature. And that continues to build and grow. I think that some of the great successes and great policy successes to see that have come out of that, though, have been New Hampshire leading the way on school choice with education freedom accounts, where now many families, it is capped by income. There are some income caps on it, though they're always trying to expand those income caps. But many families now can take the money, the tax dollars that are allotted to their child for their public school. They can take that with them and use those dollars to pay for anything from homeschooling expenses to private school tuition, to even maybe you just want to send your kid to a public school in another district over that's a better fit. Putting kind of parents back in the driver's seat. And so New Hampshire is leading the way on a policy idea that has really just been like a libertarian pipe dream for like 20 years, and we never actually saw go into reality and effect. But like New Hampshire has shown that because of the concentration of libertarians we've built here, working in coalition with the Republican Party, now one of the great libertarian ideas is seeing reality, and we have a real kind of laboratory of innovation for liberty in New Hampshire. So, but not just school choice. Obviously, there's no income tax, no sales tax. Libertarians have been phasing out what little income tax anything that resembles an income tax, they're getting rid of. You have, of course, constitutional carry, though. Now most states have constitutional carry. That doesn't sound as as a as it's not as much as something to brag about these days as maybe it was a decade ago. Now that everyone has it, I'm sure even North Carolina has it at this point.
We don't,
No,
and that's a long
no.
story. We have permitless pistol purchase now, and
Wow.
Republican supermajority. See, this is where I get so skeptical of Republicans.
So you have like 30 states in America now have it, and North
39,
Carolina's not.
39. I
I,
know it's 39 because I've been fighting to make us the 40th.
well, hold on. All right, I'll take your word for it. At 39, that would be a big jump from what I thought. But okay, well,
Unless it's 29 and I'm forgetting
I
the.
think maybe it was 29. I think maybe it was 29. Because I remember like when Florida was coming on board, like that was like 29 or 30.
Right.
Anyway, but anyway, New Hampshire and Maine, were among the first states to do constitutional carry. But I mean, so from a policy perspective, if the states are the laboratories of innovation, like what we've really lacked is a libertarian policy laboratory.
Yeah.
And we are building that in New Hampshire. Now we can pass defend the guard through the House of Representatives. We can enact school choice. We can repeal taxes you're not supposed to be able to repeal. There's so that's part of what's exciting. And as things go into effect in New Hampshire and we see that those policies work, other states now that maybe don't have the strong libertarian leadership that New Hampshire has, other states can point to it and say, this works, let's adopt it here.
So that's extraordinarily interesting. I've never thought of it like that. I have made the case to anyone listening that what we need to, and this is North Carolina specific, but we need to be building alliances with every independent, every discouraged uniparty voter, every other third party, because we need to break the duopoly machine. Because I'm convinced in a free marketplace of ideas, our ideas will succeed. But we don't have a free marketplace of ideas right now. It's like trying to promote the virtues of capitalism in a fully center planned economy, right? But we do have that petri dish to see what grows under sort of traditional conservative Republican / neocon and Democrats. Democrats, we got places like California and New York. And what happens is, as you step in, you take people's money and you throw it back in through the public sector, you're going to see some growth at first because you're pumping money into things. But very quickly, it collapses under its own weight. And all of a sudden, you have huge debt, you have hangers on, you have a state that's requiring more and more from the producers to give to the people that empower it through the vote who aren't producing anything. And you have very bad outcomes. And in California, especially, we're sort of seeing that quick boom, and now the bust is about to be outrageous. Traditional Republican, they do okay. What I think you lack is some of the innovation, because the neocon types want to put their morality first. And so they become more beholden to things like, we're going to have more police and make smoking pot illegal than they are to, we need to get the government completely out of the business sector to allow innovation. But you're right, we don't have, on a scale that's a reasonable example, a libertarian petri dish. We did. It was the United States from like 1890 to 1920, 1913, you argue, when the Fed sort of actually has its effect. And it's the greatest period of growth maybe in human history.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, America certainly was, we're founded on these beautiful ideas and we lost them. And somewhere along the way, we transformed from a republic into an empire. And basically everyone who runs everything in Washington, D.C., they're all imperialists. They're Democratic imperialists and Republican imperialists. We call them neocons and neoliberals, but what they really advocate for is an imperial philosophy that America should be the policeman of the world and the global world empire. And, all the other nations of the world need to follow rules that we ourselves do not abide by. So, but the vehicles with which they've managed to solidify this control is, of course, that two-party system, by planting themselves and basically taking control of the machinery of both parties and presenting everyone on the, at least as far as the federal level goes, every election cycle, the illusion of choice between a neocon and a neoliberal, where the major policy questions are never brought up, right? We never debate war. We never debate the Federal Reserve. We never debate any of these things that are just completely taken for granted because they agree with it. And of course, we have to pick, we're told that, right? I think this is kind of
Just
cliche
how
now,
much
right?
abortion are we going to get?
Right. How much abortion, or should the tax rate be 36 or 39%? Right. And of course, I think the culture war issues are really, really used, right, to kind of get people fighting against each other.
Fearmonger.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what was really dangerous, I think, to the establishment is when you had kind of these populist revolts back in the 2010s, right? In both parties, or at
And the
least from
Tea
both
Party
sides
and
of
the Occupy
right.
said the same thing.
Right. Tea Party and Occupy. And they were, Occupy said that something's rigged in this system and it's the big corporations. And the Tea Party said something's rigged in this system and it's the big government. And of course, the big picture was it was big business and big government in bed with each other. And the people were getting really close to challenging actual power so the power said, okay, well, let's make the people fight each other. Let's inject identity politics into everything. And so people shift their attentions away from the real enemy that's oppressing them, the corporate government power structure in Washington, D.C., and it shifts to your neighbor who's flying the wrong flag in their yard, whether it's a progress flag or a Trump flag or a Gadsden flag. Now we're supposed to hate each other. And it's worked pretty well, these culture wars, sadly.
So that is actually an awesome segue into my next question for you. So my background is marketing and communications. Started as a writer, and I've been in marketing and comms for 25 years. You talk about the polarization, and I agree with you completely, like timeline and everything. Occupy and Tea Party and the people who subscribe to those movements were looking at what the other one was saying, and they're like, hey, that makes sense. And it's kind of the opposite side of the coin of what I'm saying. And immediately the response was the government and a corporate state, the kleptocracy, I call it. It's not even an old anymore. Came together in this synchronized effort to drive people back to hating each other. You had things like normalize ostracizing your Trump supporting family member. Like that was immediate. That was a headline. If you succeed in New Hampshire and you're on the trajectory to succeed, the sort of golden outcome would be for that success to become the shining light on the hill once again and spread liberty back to the United States. How do you think about, do you worry about, do you plan for, how do you adjust for so I'll frame it like this. I have a friend who's a sort of a small libertarian, but a big Kennedy supporter. And he was extolling all the successes RFK had early this year. I was like, yeah, you're right. And I'd love to see Kennedy over either of these two. But the machine has not turned on him yet. Like, get ready, because it's really, really good at turning on things. How do you push back against the machine if you succeed? Because it will turn on you.
Well, I think that the beauty of the liberty movement is that there's no central figure who is so essential to the movement that if they're taken off the board by the CIA or whomever,
Yeah,
right,
that's true too.
it's not going to stop anything, right? The MAGA movement, if they took out Donald Trump, they don't have their, it always does help when you have like some central figure who can ride in and try to change things on the federal level, whether it's a Trump or a Javier Milei. We don't really have the privilege of that in the liberty movement. At least we haven't since Ron Paul. But that hasn't stopped the revolution from continuing on, because Ron Paul was so adamant that it was about the ideas and not about him. So he taught people the ideas so that they could carry on. They could take that torch of liberty and carry on without him. And so now you have thousands and thousands of Ron Pauls, working across the country in their own little ways, whether it's through state legislative campaigns or homeschooling networks or creating Bitcoin or, whatever it is. So I think that yeah, the machine tries to turn against us, but we're like the Hydra, right? There's no like one head that you can chop off. They can't stop Bitcoin because it's decentralized. They can't stop the Liberty Movement because it's decentralized. So so good luck. I mean, their weakness is centralization, and our weakness is that we have spontaneous order. If Rand Paul were assassinated, if Thomas Massey were gone, if I were taken out, Justin Amash was never heard from again, the movement would continue forward, and the next soldiers would line up.
I like that answer. I tend to agree with you there. I do think about it a lot. So we have a pretty close governor race going on. North Carolina is a light red state. It's going to go. I mean, again, unless something changes dramatically, it's going to go Trump. But a lot of the other offices really are up in the air, and our candidate's pulling it close to 5% now and climbing. And we got a pretty good plan going given our limited resources. What we've found right now is they're pouring their money into attacking each other at the governor level. But I can see it starting to turn against us a little bit. You're starting to see some anti-libertarian stuff out there. And so I do think about that. But I like your answer because we have to be thinking about each election and the next election, of course, but we can't think only about the election. We have to think, what's the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan? And that's where it's interesting to hear what you're doing with the Free State Project. So let me ask you this. What are your goals?
Well, I mean, I think the goal is to establish liberty in our lifetime. I think the goal is to keep bringing more and more people who love liberty, whatever label they affix to themselves, constitutional conservative, classical liberal, libertarian, whatever it is, if they believe in the non-aggression principle and they believe in, individual human liberty, we want them to come and join us in New Hampshire and help us achieve more and more of the critical mass in democratic systems and also just culture building to really, solidify New Hampshire and restore New Hampshire as the live free or die state. So, that's just kind of what we're going to keep doing. And long-term plans beyond that, I mean, I don't know. There's a million. I guess that is the long-term plan, and uh, there's other strategies and things to talk about. I'd love to see my home state of Maine, where a state that I love, but which I think is having a real problem with the progressives politically dominating the state. I mean, part of me would really love to see them in Maine. They take a play out of the Greater Idaho movement and petition to break away and join New Hampshire, just like Eastern Oregon is trying to break away and join Idaho. It's so I don't know. There's a lot of different things, and but really, it's just trying to build a liberty homeland where we can be free.
So I want to be respectful of your time. Just a couple more questions. You hit on something that I wanted to ask next. We talk about the liberty movement infiltrating the Republicans, using the Republican Party as the vehicle to drive liberty. What about the Democrats? Because I don't think we can abandon Democrats, and in particular, where I see opportunity, there's two opportunities I see. I see opportunity with actual Marxists, so not even progressives, but like principled, I read Marx in college and think I'm a Marxist. Because if you're a Marxist at 24 and you encounter the right literature, you're a libertarian by the time you're 27, I think. Because to me, they just haven't like finished their thought. And then
yeah.
Go ahead. I'll continue to answer that.
Well, I guess I would say I think it is interesting. I think that if you look at like Rothbardianism and Marxism and you look at them side by side, they are very similar, except for a different casting of who the oppressor class is, right? Under Rothbardian thought, the oppressor class is, the state or those who would use state power to kind of, oppress people, to take people's stuff and harm them, right? Whereas Marx, I think had his vision was much more just kind of the wealthy class in general. But of course, I think Marx came about in an environment where the wealthy class and the political class it was kind of hard to distinguish between them because we were talking about like, European aristocratic societies where your wealth and your status was very much tied up with the state. Whereas in America, we've tried to build a society where these two things are separate. And so I think kind of the Marxists in America really misapply things because they kind of lump everyone in the same category if you're rich. Right. But certainly someone who became rich because they created value for people through voluntary markets is not the same kind of person as someone who became rich because they had weapons manufacturing contracts with the federal government to go blow people up in foreign countries for no purpose whatsoever other than to like have a giant money laundering operation for tax dollars, right? So those two things are not created equal. I think where the Marxists and the Rothbardians could agree is that like, hey, that weapons manufacturer like guy is the oppressor class, but the Marxists in America need to realize that just because you're the CEO of a company doesn't mean that you're the oppressor class. In fact, you may have made tons of value for people and may very well be one of the great champions that we need in America.
One of the areas I always have success with, again, when I say principled Marxists, they almost always tend to be fairly recent college grads who have read Marx or a lot of them have read like interpretations of Marx or guidance on Marx without reading Marx. And when you introduce them to the Rothbardian, Milton Friedman, even Thomas Sowell, like that whole line of thought, it opens up their mind because then I'm like, I'm a collectivist too. I just don't believe it should be mandated. Like a team is a very powerful structure. If everyone's in there in a voluntary agreement, that's an awesome way to be. If your ideas are better, go live them and people will follow.
Yeah, and I believe in communism when it's like in my family, right?
Exactly.
Like a family is a communist structure, but the problem is you try to scale up and it just doesn't work, right? So, I think I remember someone, I don't remember who said it once before. He said, I'm a libertarian on the national level, a Republican on the state level, a Democrat on the local level, and a communist on the family level, right? There's something to be said for that, though. I tend to be more libertarian throughout all of that, but there's something to be said for the more local you are, the more, even Thomas Jefferson believed that the only place that democracy works is on the local level where the individual has the greatest say possible. So there's something to be said for decentralization. And if you are going to have like these these collective decision-making powers, that it should be handled as locally as possible, down to the individual and the family, if at all possible.
So you have those Marxists, and then you have your traditional Democrats who I think are getting more and more turned off by the party. I think, like you pointed out, what you have are progressives. So they have this, it really is, it's cultural Marxism has gotten beat to death, but it's this postmodernist sort of Foucault-driven, like everyone that doesn't have power is an oppressor class, and we should be looking for egalitarian equity, equality of outcome, and anything that stands against that, it's like Marcuse and repressive tolerance is what we're seeing. What about the Democrats that are so turned off by this but can't get behind just being Republican? Do you think there's opportunity there?
I will say there have been a few Democrats who I've worked with in the legislature who I would hesitantly call kind of like left libertarians. I think of like in the state of Maine, a legislator I've worked with a lot, Senator Craig Hickman, who's kind of a very socially progressive, but he also is very pro Second Amendment rights and for food freedom and for vaccine choice. And maybe we don't agree on taxes and some other things, but there's certainly the ideal world would be that the left libertarians take over the Democratic Party, the right libertarians take over the Republican Party, and that the neocons and the neoliberals are all forced out into a third party called the Authoritarian Party, where they get together every 4 years and they have a national convention and they argue about who the real authoritarian is, and they accomplish nothing, right? Meanwhile, the left libertarians and the right libertarians running the two major parties are scaling back government and perhaps having very different emphases on certain things, culture war issues. They'll probably still be fighting about those things, but at least so all joking aside, I say this to kind of illustrate the point that I think that sometimes in we can get so caught up in the partisanship of the Libertarian Party itself that we are in fact engaging in a LARP where we are not really affecting change. But we're just going and we're arguing for our own, I don't know, some claim to an identity.
It's virtue signaling. It's libertarian virtue signaling.
Yeah, it can be that. It can be that. I remember at the Libertarian National Convention, I remember hearing a delegate who was nominating a chair candidate who was going against Angela McArdle. And I just remember this person saying in their speech, I guess criticizing Angela for their strategy of, recognizing we're not going to win very many elections. So let's see how we can be strategic and use our influence. And I remember the response was, we are the Libertarian Party. Our purpose is to win elections, and that's what we do. That's what she said with all confidence. That's what we do. And I just thought to myself, well, maybe you can make a case for the first two parts, but that third part is not. That's not what we actually see in reality because the system's rigged against you. So I think that sometimes there's this pretending, this make believe that the Libertarian Party is going to be able to function like one of the two major parties, and the system's rigged against it. And the irony is, the only way you can change that is by winning elections and changing the rules of the system, right? In Maine, we were able to lower the thresholds for libertarians to qualify for ballot access, but we were able to do that because libertarians got elected as Republicans and sponsored the bill to make it happen. But the irony is, if we're all just like focused on this third party to the exclusion of all other political strategies, that's all the libertarians will ever achieve, is to be in this marginalized third party.
And to further that, we need to remember how quickly they will shut it down if we start to have success, if they can, and we don't have levers against it. Look at what happened to Larry Sharp in New York. He had some real success, and they were like, oh yeah, we're going to make it so high of a hurdle for a third party to get on that you will never challenge us again.
Yeah, and certainly that's why, Larry, I wonder sometimes if he would have better success kind of infiltrating the Republican Party and running as a candidate there, or doing even one better, just leaving the Empire State behind completely and coming to the Free State.
Because he's one of our best messengers. He's a great candidate. He's a good dude. He's been so good to North Carolina, fighting for other people, and he's in AOC's district. And it's like, dude, you have so high of a wall to climb. So 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
We were talking about, you were just at Pork Fest. What was your favorite thing at Pork Fest? Tell everyone a little bit about Pork Fest.
Well, so the Porcupine Freedom Festival is one of our 2 big annual flagship events, and we just had it, and there were so many things that I loved. Ron Paul spoke for the first time we've heard from him at Pork Fest. He gave a virtual speech, but we had a nice Q&A with him as well, so that was a great thing. But I will tell you what my personal favorite thing is we have a lot of, as Pork Fest has grown, we have more and more families at Pork Fest, and we really focused a lot of this year on having great events for the kids, more than ever. And there were some really great events for like the 10 and under kids, but I wanted to make sure that the teens and the preteens had something fun to do. So we did a mock legislature where they formed into political parties. They elected a Speaker of the House, and we took one bill all the way through the entire lawmaking process. And I don't want to tell, I don't think I should tell people just exactly what the bill is that these Free State kids put forward and passed into imaginary law, but I'll just tell you, they aren't fans of Washington, D.C.
Good. They're being raised right.
So, and anyway, I'm excited. It was a lot of fun, but it was, teaching real parliamentary procedure to the next generation that, you only have to be 18 to run for the State House of Representatives in New Hampshire. So some of these folks, I'm certain, are going to be, state legislators in the future, and we're training them young how to take over state legislative bodies.
I love it. So one last question, too, because I'll ask you for socials and stuff. But you talked about moving to New Hampshire, executive director of the Free State Project, what you're looking at. But what is next for Eric?
I mean, what's next for me is just focusing on the Free State Project. I mean, I'll be totally honest. I mean, people keep asking me like, okay, you're coming to New Hampshire. Like, are you running for
That was one
X
part
or are
I
you
was
running
listening
for Y? Or it's like, part of the reason I decided to take the job is I wanted a break from electoral politics. And who's to say, maybe in the future, once I'm settled and really feel like I have an understanding of New Hampshire and the communities and the community that I live in, maybe I'll run for something again in the future, but I don't see anything. I don't see myself running for anything in the next half decade, at least. I'm really looking forward to just building community and also maybe taking some time to start to make plans for, family myself.
So I love it. Appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate your time here today. Before we go, and I'll throw them up on the screen too, but what do you want to plug? What are the socials people should be following and checking out?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Senator Brakey. I will also note that we will be, the Free State Project, myself included, will be at Freedom Fest in July, and also the Young Americans for Liberty National Convention in early August. So if you're going to either of those events, be sure to say hello and learn more about the Free State Project at fsp.org. If you're ever coming to visit New Hampshire anytime, we've got events going on pretty much almost every single day. There's something in the liberty movement going on in New Hampshire. So just shoot us a line, let us know you're coming, and we'll connect you with the community.
I love it. Eric, thank you so much for your time. Great discussion. Thank you for everything you're doing. We need more and more and more.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
Well, hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Groo and Dub.
Yeah.
How are
Hey
you,
there.
everybody? How's everybody doing? I am in the wonderful play. I'm in South Georgia right now. I'm at Magnolia Springs State Park in a cabin doing the show live from the woods. So I don't have really great service today, but I apologize if I cut in and out.
No, it's fine.
How are you, Dub?
You're like Max Headroom in the 80s. So it'll be okay. You got old trusty me here with a little bit more stable connection. Just sitting here rooting for the rain.
Yeah.
We've been dry
Good
recently
deal.
and we just want some rain, please. So
Yeah. North Carolina had a little bit of rain before I left to come down here. I'm on a family reunion. So that's why I'm here. And we couldn't skip our show. So I'm pulling some time away. I've been at a water park all day long today. So I'm fried. Literally about 45 minutes south of here, there's a really cool water park called Swim in the Barrow or something like that, or Splash in the Burrow or something like that. It's in Statesboro, Georgia.
okay, that makes sense then. Splash in the Burrow. B-O-R-O.
Yeah. I mean, it was like they have these crazy slides and a lazy river, and I had some Italian ice, and we had a little cabana where we were our whole family was hanging out underneath it. So, that's what I've been doing. I'm just completely exhausted though from being in the sun all day. I feel like I got way too much sun, and I burn very easily. Do you? Do you burn easy?
You're talking to a guy that has almost every version of European ancestry, save for one Cherokee ancestor in him, and that Cherokee part didn't come out. And I am a purveyor of the SPF 70. So
Yeah, I have 50 on.
But here's the thing: in my older
me.
age, I have learned that I've worn enough sunscreen in my life that I don't like wearing sunscreen. So when I mow grass and people think I'm insane in the heat of the summer for doing this, I wear a floppy hat I wear one of those long sleeve
Nice.
Under Armour shirts that wicks sweat off you, long sleeve. I wear gloves, gardening gloves. I wear sweatpants and, of course, shoes. You know, because I'm sometimes going under trees and stuff, and I don't want ticks and stuff crawl up my legs, even though I've caught a few off
Right.
this year. Ticks are
You
bad
get
this
sick
year.
from a tick bite. Oh
Yeah, but I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
you
they
get the
are.
wrong tick on you at the wrong time. Yeah, be careful out there, everyone. But
Those
anyway,
deer ticks, they carry diseases. They really do.
yeah, yeah, and here's the thing. Yeah, you have your Lyme disease and your Rocky Mountain spotted
Yeah.
fever, but the one that terrifies me the most is the new one that's been around the last few years, where it makes you
Oh, the COVID
allergic
tick.
to
Yeah, the
meat.
COVID tick. Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
and that one to me terrifies me because I love meat, and if you
Yeah.
take that ability away from me, I don't want to become a vegan because of a tick. You know,
Right. No, you're right about that.
I'd rather become a vegan because I want to become a vegan, not a vegan because else I'll die or
Right.
break out in hives or something. I don't want to do that. But anyway, let's get on to other things. We're here to talk about sports, man. We're here to talk about
Let's jump into sports. I don't know if you saw it, but I just finished watching the France Portugal game, and
Yes.
it went to a shootout. It was 0-0, went to overtime. It was still 0-0, went to a shootout. Mbappe was not playing because he has a broken nose, but
Yeah, he got subbed out.
France pulled it off. Yeah,
They
France
did,
pulled it off.
and it was all because there was no spectacular save in the shootout. The third penalty taker hit the post, and so that pretty much
I
lost
saw
it for
that.
Portugal.
Hit the post.
And France hit all 5 of their penalties, so you can't beat 5 for 5 with one miss.
Yeah, they got all 5.
And in the other one, Spain scored in extra time to beat Germany 2-1. So those two will face off next week in the first semifinal.
Yeah, they put Germany out, which is where it's being held. So that's kind of a bummer for them, but congrats for Spain. Now Spain's going to play France, which is going to be a crazy game. And tonight is Canada and Venezuela in the Copa.
Yeah. Nobody expected that quarterfinal. Nobody.
I'm like, Canada, really?
But
Canada,
you want to know who's leading Canada?
USA.
And it makes me upset who's leading Canada. Jesse Marsh, who used to be the interim coach of the United States men's national team.
Oh, wow.
And under Jesse Marsh, if you recall, the United States team won the inaugural Nations League trophy of CONCACAF and the Gold Cup. And I don't think you can discount both of those things because that is our preeminent tournament, regional tournament is the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
So you can't discount any of those things, but for them to hold the Copa America on our home soil, give us hosting abilities, giving us an automatic berth in preparation for the 2026 World Cup, for us to get grouped out, to lose out in the group round, with
terrible.
With 2 underwhelming performances, one against Panama, which you can argue a good team overcomes bad officiating.
Right.
And then with our golden generation, this is our golden generation, depending on who you talk to, it's being wasted under the current head coach, Greg Berhalter. And I was saying after the Panama game, that it was just like a few years ago when the United States lost to Panama in the Gold Cup under Berhalter. I asked that they fire him. And so, and it seems like we're repeating the same thing over and over again. And really, something that I just heard today, it is breaking news, and it came through Fox Sports. Because, they have the rights to the World Cup and the rights to U.S. matches. They are hearing on good regard that the United States National Organization, the Federation will make a decision this coming Wednesday. Today is the 5th of July. It is a Friday. So that means on the 10th of July, they will make a decision about the future of Greg Berhalter. And so,
Okay.
and so we will know.
Talk about that
And
next
also,
episode.
when Jurgen Klinsmann was fired, it took about 10 days after flaming out of the tournament to make a decision. So it's not looking good right now. And depending on how Canada does, I mean, I would not be shocked if the United States gave Jesse Marsh a number he could not refuse to step down from Canada to become the permanent head coach of the United States team after this Gold Cup, depending on how good or bad Canada does. You know, if Canada, at least makes the semifinals, that means, they've done very well for themselves.
I'm
And
shocked that they're there.
if they make the championship, that's a win in itself. They don't even have to win it. That's considered a victory in, Canada's, soccer history.
Yeah. I mean, go Canada. I think I'd rather see Canada win than Venezuela.
Well, I mean,
To
it
be
is a
honest.
tale of two minnows, if you will, of the soccer world, because Venezuela's not known for their soccer. What is
Yeah.
Venezuela known for? Their baseball. So, this is a big win for them to make the quarterfinals, because they're usually being grouped out and eliminated in the group stage, usually in the Copas that are held in South America. So this is a great thing for them as well. So I just am rooting for a good match. I know it's not going to be on the level of France and Portugal, but I think it'll be full of fun, soccer. So it'll be fun to watch.
Did you catch the Argentine game last night?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Messi. And
But-
it went to a shootout as well. Messi was the first one to kick PK, and guess what? He missed. But the other players pulled it together and won it for the team. But he missed.
Right.
He
Well, I mean, he is getting up there in age. I mean, today, Portugal was playing a 41-year-old Pepe on defense, and the man could still play defense. So, depending on, some of these guys are outdoing their ages in soccer and in these international tournaments that are not the Olympics, because in the Olympics, there are special rules. All your players have to be 23 years of age or younger, and you can only carry a maximum of 3 players over 20.
It was 18. Is it 20? Now, I have a question. My son was asking me this. Do you have to be 18 to play in the World Cup, or can you be under 18? Do you know?
To join a senior men's team, you can be as young as 16 years of age.
Really? Because, Mbappe got his first World Cup, when he was 18 years old. And he's the youngest ever. So.
But there are 16-year-olds playing in this Euro. So.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was different than the World Cup, though, than the Euro
Right.
Cup or the
And the thing is, FIFA's changing their rules all the time. So what could be legal today might be illegal tomorrow. So.
Right.
Yeah,
And did you see the infamous goaltender stop by Turkey or Turkey or however you?
Well,
pronounce
I
their,
still call
their
them
name.
Turkey. They are
He was
telling
going
people
one way and literally jumped sideways. And
he matrixed that ball.
That was insane.
Yeah, that
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw the highlight
live.
and I'm as a former goalkeeper, I was stunned by that save. That's usually a save that you dive for in vain and it goes past you. and you're kicking the ball out of the net in frustration, but he made the save. So
It was
salute to that
insane. Yeah, it was
man.
crazy. It was crazy. It was, in my opinion, one of the greatest saves I've ever seen. It was that good. And he saved them from going into extra time and probably a shootout. So it was a game-changing save, and I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, it was amazing. And you know, it's just, I mean, it's nuts how you know, people just discount goaltenders as just, you know, they get the large gloves and they got to wear different colors and this and that and the other, but they're athletes too. And
Oh, yes.
and so you can't really go by, you know, goaltenders don't see much action when the ball stays in the middle of the field a lot, you know. But you know, something now we have to talk about because it is North Carolina related. Free agency has occurred in the National Hockey League, and it has affected the Carolina Hurricanes. And I wanted to get your opinion on what you thought about some of the moves that they have done. Personally, I'm disappointed in a couple of people. I'm pleased at a few others. And I have a lot of question marks about a few, but overall, and I know it's tough, but one of the names I want to discuss, and I was talking about this last year, and I'm probably in the minority on this. I don't mind seeing Teuvo Teravainen go. Because I've seen a decline in his performance over the last 2 years that I don't think commands a salary that he got from the Chicago Blackhawks, which was the original team who drafted him. So, you know, those are one of the.
I agree. I don't think he did a whole lot last season, and I don't think he was really a game changer. And perhaps their trade is going to benefit the team more, and I respect the decision of the
Right, but you do know the other ones that left, and they sort of broke my heart. The number one was Brett Pesce.
Yeah, I like him.
Who left and went to New Jersey. And also the youngster Stefan Neeson went to New Jersey. They're trying to become the Devil Canes up there because they always seem to snipe our free agents. You remember Dougie Hamilton? He went to New Jersey. Now these two, it's like they're all the time. And if you go back in time, where did Kevin Weeks go after he was let go by the Carolina Hurricanes back in the early 2000s? New Jersey. So, you know,
you think that it's similar? It's a similar hockey style and a similar hockey management style, New Jersey and Carolina.
Yeah,
you think that's why there's a lot of that overlap.
Yeah, but you know, we got some good people in return. Of course, as you know, Jacob Slavin signed an 8-year extension. He's going to be a Cane for life. Jordan Martinook signed a 3-year extension. He's going to be a Cane for life.
That's my man right there. I love Martinook, so we're good there.
We got William Carrier off of Vegas. And that's a great pickup, a good left winger. We got Sean Walker, good defenseman off of Colorado. We got Eric Robinson, left winger off of Buffalo. We got Tyson Jost, the center off of Buffalo. So those are two good third line guys there, or fourth liners. And we got the ghost back, Shane Gostabaher, off of Detroit. So he decided to come back to Carolina because he didn't like that other team in red up in Detroit.
The Red Wings. Okay.
Yeah, so
well, I think, I'm not upset by any of it, man. I think that they know what they're doing, they know what they want, they know what direction they think they need to go, and they're doing it. So, I respect the trades. I respect their decision. They're spending some money, and they're just preparing for next season, which, they really got to do something a little bit different because they're not quite making it. So,
Well, here's the thing.
I think
I'm one that is saying that it is probably, and I really believe this, it'll probably be the last year of Jordan Stahl. I'm talking period hockey.
he's the team captain too,
Yeah,
So-
yeah. And the thing is, there are two people in line to become captain, and one of those people are is the person who just signed an 8-year extension. Because Slavin wears the A, and I think
Yeah.
Slavin would be a great captain for the Carolina Hurricanes.
I agree with that.
Because right now your A's are him and Aho. And as much as Aho's been my boy, I just don't think he has the voice necessary to carry a locker room.
Right.
He's always been sort of quiet and reserved.
He's kind of soft spoken. I get it. Yeah.
So, yeah, soft spoken. I mean, he's an intense player and he's a good player and he gets after it. But I think what you need in a good captain is a good voice, and I think Slavin has that good voice.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't mind him being the next captain of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Would be cool.
Yeah, oh,
What else do
absolutely.
you want to talk about?
Well, of course, as you know, the NBA had their draft, and the Hornets picked up 2 men, and I'm going to struggle to pronounce his name correctly, but
Your best shot, buddy.
yeah, because they picked up a guy from France in the draft. And hold on, I got it right here. I thought I had it right here. Oh, I hate it. Don't you hate it when you lose bookmark?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I
there we go. That's the one I'm looking for, but you took me to the wrong spot. I hate it when it does things like this. So yep. No, I know about
Don't worry
that.
about it.
Oh,
He's got a
speaking
crazy
of,
name,
no,
okay?
we got to
He's got
say
a
this.
crazy name from France.
Well, no, here's the thing. Before we talk about that crazy name from France, he's not a crazy player, though. He's gonna, I think, be a good one for us. But you see where Kemba Walker retired officially from all of basketball. And today he was announced as a special assistant on the coaching staff of the Charlotte Hornets.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that'd be nice.
So let's see here. Here's all the people. So here it is. The roster for the Summer League this year. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these names are from the G League. A lot of these names are from, from the draft. Like, for instance, KJ Simpson is the guy they picked up at the 46th pick. And Tijane Saloon. It almost sounds like I'm saying saloon, but it's Saloon. And he is an 18-year-old from France. And there were 3 Frenchmen picked in the top 6. He was the 6th pick.
Okay,
And
good.
so everybody's getting on the France train after seeing what Wembanyama did. So it's time to get tall Frenchmen, I guess. And here, looking at the Summer League, I'm happy. There's a man on this Summer League roster who's an invitee that played for my beloved UNCA Bulldogs and was 2-time Big South Player of the Year. Got him to the tournament last year. Couldn't quite make it this year, but still got Player of the Year. And that is Drew Pember. He will be wearing number 27 as an invitee. Awesome. Yeah. And man, that would be wonderful to see an Asheville alum make the NBA, because I'm not sure any Asheville alum has ever made the NBA. I know they've played in Europe. I know they've played in the G League, but I know no Asheville Bulldog has ever made the NBA. And that would
that's
be
cool.
amazing to happen. So, that's what's happened with the Hornets and the Hurricanes. And I haven't heard any new news on the Panthers other than, their OTAs wrapped up and now we're just waiting for training camps, coming up near the end of the month. So that's all I have.
Yeah, well, all we can do is hope for the best,
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing. We cannot
Still a
forget
fan.
this. We cannot forget this. On July the 1st, the ACC is now up to 18 members with the additions of Stanford, the University of California at Berkeley, and Southern Methodist University in Dallas.
Cool.
So, it would not surprise me if one of these years they hold the ACC championship in the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, because, for years they've held it in Bank of America Stadium down in Charlotte. But, now that Dallas is in the footprint, you bring them out there to the neutral venue of the Cotton Bowl because, because that's a neutral venue. SMU does not play in the Cotton Bowl. They don't play at AT&T. They play at Ford Stadium. Isn't it called Ford Stadium on the campus of SMU?
Yes, it is.
So, and the thing is, this is the first major conference SMU has been in since the death penalty. Because, their death penalty was pretty much on the death of the Southwestern Conference back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So when the leftovers of the Southwest Conference merged with the old Big 8 to make the Big 12, and, that's where we got the Big 12 from.
Yeah.
But,
well, I've got family calling me to go to dinner.
Well, you all enjoy that dinner.
Yeah.
That post-4th eaten, done. And
I hope you had a good 4th. I hope everybody had a good 4th and was safe.
And stock up on some solar cane and aloe and get cooled off.
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm fried. I was at water park all day, man. But it's been a pleasure again. This is Dub and Groo, aka Cat Daddy. You're the cat daddy, right?
Yeah,
and,
I was 3, but no more.
How many cats do you have now? Is it 3 or 4?
3. No more. No more.
Oh, 3. Okay. Yeah, that's what they all say. That's what
2
all
by
the cat
choice,
daddies
1
say.
by the cat distribution system. So
awesome. Well, thanks again. This is Groo and Dub signing off. We really appreciate it. And
y'all have a good
next
one.
time watching. Thank you very much.